My name is Claire, and I'm 28 years old. This morning started like any birthday should, with sunlight streaming through my apartment window and excitement bubbling in my chest. After 3 years of working double shifts as a nurse, I had finally paid off my Honda Civic, my pride and joy. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We sold your car. Your brother needs the money for his business. Family comes first. You owe us $6,000 for what we loaned you in college." My hands shook as I read those words 3 times, each reading making less sense than the last. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt betrayed by family, please like and subscribe to hear how I turned this nightmare into my liberation. Growing up in suburban Denver, I learned early that being the responsible older daughter meant carrying everyone else's dreams on my shoulders. Our split-level house on Maple Street looked perfect from the outside with its manicured lawn, and my mother Patricia's prized rose bushes. Inside, the dynamics were far more complicated. My mother Patricia ran our household like a small kingdom, where she was the undisputed queen. At 56, she still dressed impeccably for her part-time job at the bank, her blonde hair always perfectly styled, her voice carrying that particular tone that made you feel guilty for things you hadn't even done yet. She had this way of tilting her head when she looked at you, like she was calculating your worth in real time, and I always seemed to come up short in her equations. My father Robert was a different story entirely. At 58, he worked as an accountant for a local firm, spending his days buried in spreadsheets and his evenings buried in his study. He had this habit of adjusting his glasses when Mom started one of her campaigns, a nervous tic that appeared sometime after their 29th anniversary. He wasn't a bad man, just a quiet one, who had learned that agreeing with Patricia was easier than standing up to her. His silence became the soundtrack of my childhood, broken only by occasional cleared throats and mumbled agreements. Then there was Tyler, my younger brother by 2 years. At 26, he had the kind of confidence that only comes from never having to earn anything. Tall like Dad, but with Mom's sharp features, Tyler could charm anyone within 5 minutes of meeting them. He had this laugh that made you want to laugh along even when nothing was funny. Mom called him her miracle baby, born after 2 miscarriages, and she never let anyone forget how precious he was to her. I started working when I was 14, not because we were poor, but because I wanted things that didn't come with strings attached. My first job was babysitting for the Morrison family 3 houses down. Mrs. Morrison paid me $8 an hour to watch her twin boys, and I saved every penny in a shoebox under my bed. By 15, I was working at the local ice cream shop on weekends, my fingers always smelling faintly of vanilla, and my arms sore from scooping frozen desserts. The summer I turned 16, I got a job at Target folding clothes and manning the fitting rooms. I remember the day I came home with my first real paycheck, $423 after 2 weeks of work. Mom took one look at it and said Tyler needed new football equipment for his senior year. That night, I handed over $300 and watched Tyler's face light up while mine stayed carefully neutral. Dad adjusted his glasses and went back to reading his newspaper. When it came time for college, I discovered the college fund they had promised me since elementary school had mysteriously vanished. Tyler had started his first business venture at 18, a food truck that specialized in gourmet grilled cheese. The truck cost $42,000, which happened to be exactly what was in my college account. Mom explained it away with practiced ease. Tyler's business would support the whole family, she said. I could take out loans, she said. Nurses make good money anyway, she said. So I did what I always did. I figured it out myself. I enrolled at the University of Colorado's nursing program and worked nights at the hospital as a nursing assistant. 4 years of 12-hour shifts followed by 8 a.m. classes. 4 years of eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and falling asleep in my scrubs. 4 years of watching Tyler's food truck sit abandoned in our parents' driveway after 3 months of operation, while I struggled to pay for textbooks. I graduated with honors summa cum laude, with a degree in nursing and $43,000 in student loan debt. My parents didn't come to my graduation. Tyler had an important meeting with potential investors that day, and family comes first after all. I walked across that stage alone, my cap and gown rented, because I couldn't afford to buy them, and I promised myself things would be different once I had my career established. The Honda Civic came into my life 2 years ago after my ancient Toyota finally gave up on life. It was a 2019 model in pristine condition silver, with black interior, and only 32,000 miles on it. The dealer wanted 21,000, and I negotiated him down to 18,500. I paid 8,000 down from my savings money I had scraped together from every overtime shift. Every holiday worked, every weekend sacrificed. That car represented something more than transportation. Every monthly payment of $312 was a declaration of independence. Every mile I drove was a mile away from depending on anyone else. I kept it meticulously clean, oil changes exactly on scheduled tires, rotated religiously. It even still had that new car smell because I bought special air fresheners to preserve it. 6 months ago, my apartment building started major construction on the parking garage. The management offered temporary passes for street parking, but break-ins had been increasing in the neighborhood. Mom called one evening, her voice honeyed with concern. She offered to let me keep the car in their garage. They had the space, she said, and it would be safer there. Family helps family, she said. I should have heard the calculation in her voice. But I was tired from a particularly brutal shift, and the offer seemed genuine. I gave them the spare key on a Thursday evening. Tyler was there, sprawled on the couch playing video games on the 70-inch TV they had bought him for Christmas. He barely looked up when I walked in. Mom took the key with a smile that I should have recognized as triumphant. Dad was in his study door, closed, the sound of his adding machine clicking away like always. The red flags started appearing slowly like bruises you don't notice until they're fully formed. Tyler announced his latest business venture 3 months ago, a luxury car detailing service called Elite Shine. He had business cards made with gold embossing and a website that cost $4,000 to design. The only thing missing was inventory and equipment minor details in Tyler's mind. Mom started calling me more frequently, always with requests wrapped in guilt. Could I lend them $2,000 for the property taxes they'd pay me back next month? Could I cover Tyler's car insurance this month? He was between opportunities. Could I help with the electric bill? Things were tight with Dad's hours being cut. Each request came with the same refrain about family loyalty, about how they had raised me for 18 years, about how ungrateful I was being if I hesitated even slightly. Last month, Tyler posted on Instagram about his business taking off. The photo showed him standing next to a black BMW M4 grinning like he had conquered the world. Mom commented with 5 heart emojis and wrote my successful son. I noticed the BMW had temporary tags, and I wondered briefly how he had managed that, when just a week earlier, Mom had called asking if I could loan Tyler $5,000 for business equipment. 2 weeks before my birthday, Mom made a comment that should have set off every alarm in my head. We were having Sunday dinner, a command performance I couldn't skip without facing days of guilt-inducing phone calls. Over pot roast that Dad had cooked because Mom was tired from shopping with Tyler all day, she mentioned how selfish it was for young people to live alone when family had room for them. "You could save so much money living here," she said, cutting her meat with precise movements. "That expensive apartment downtown, that car payment you're always complaining about, all that money could go toward helping the family." Tyler nodded enthusiastically, his mouth full of food. Dad adjusted his glasses and asked if anyone wanted more green beans. I explained for the 100th time that my apartment was 8 minutes from the hospital, that I needed my own space after 12-hour shifts, that I wasn't complaining about my car payment, but simply mentioning it when she asked about my finances. The conversation ended like it always did, with Mom sighing dramatically and saying she didn't understand why I wanted to be so separate from the family that loved me. The week of my birthday, I was euphoric. I had requested the day off 6 months in advance, a small miracle in the chronically understaffed cardiac unit where I worked. My best friends Sarah and Jessica had planned everything perfectly. We would leave at 7 in the morning, drive up to Rocky Mountain National Park, hike the Emerald Lake Trail, have lunch at that little cafe in Estes Park that served the best elk burgers in Colorado, and be back by evening for drinks at our favorite rooftop bar. Sarah had even made a playlist for the drive, 3 hours of songs from our college years, when we were young and stupid, and believed the world was ours for the taking. Jessica brought her professional camera to document the day. We had matching t-shirts that said Birthday Girl and Birthday Squad, ridiculous and perfect, and exactly what I needed after months of exhausting shifts and family drama. The morning of October 15th started with my alarm playing Happy Birthday at 6 a.m., a silly tradition I had maintained since college. I made myself coffee in my favorite mug, the one Sarah had given me, that said World's Okayest Nurse, and sat on my tiny balcony watching the sunrise paint the Denver skyline gold and pink. The air was crisp, that perfect fall temperature where you needed a jacket in the morning but would be comfortable in just a shirt by noon. I was in the shower conditioner in my hair singing along to Taylor Swift when I heard my phone buzzing insistently on the bathroom counter. I ignored it at first, assuming it was birthday messages from friends and coworkers. The buzzing continued, aggressive and demanding, so I shut off the water and reached for it with dripping hands. The text from my mother was sent at 6:43 a.m. No happy birthday, no heart emojis, no pretense of warmth, just cold calculated words that made my wet skin break out in goosebumps. We sold your car. Tyler needed the money for inventory for his business. This is what families do for each other. You owe us $6,000 for the student loans we co-signed. Payment due immediately. Family comes first, Claire. Always. I read it once, then again. Then a third time, water dripping from my hair onto the phone screen, distorting the words but not their meaning. My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down on the closed toilet seat towel wrapped hastily around me, my mind trying to process what couldn't possibly be real. I called her immediately, my fingers shaking so badly I had to try 3 times to hit her contact. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Her recorded voice, pleasant and professional, asked me to leave a message. I hung up and called again. This time it went straight to voicemail. She had declined my call. My father's phone rang 6 times before he answered, his voice carefully neutral. Hello, Claire. Dad, what happened to my car? There was a pause, the sound of a door closing. Your mother thought it was best. Tyler really needs this for his business to succeed. That's my car. Dad, my name is on the title. I make the payments. How could you sell my car? Another pause, longer this time. It's done, Claire. Your mother handled everything. I have to go. The line went dead. I sat there, still dripping, still in my towel, staring at the phone like it might ring again, and someone would tell me this was all a terrible joke. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to call Tyler, but his phone was apparently turned off. I knew better than to try my mother again. Sarah called at 7:05, her voice bright with excitement. Birthday girl, Jessica and I are leaving now to pick you up. Hope you're ready for the best day ever. I couldn't form words. My throat had closed up and all I could manage was a strange choking sound. Sarah's voice shifted immediately to concern. What's wrong? Are you okay? My family sold my car, I managed to whisper. This morning. They sold my car. What? That doesn't make sense. Your car. The Honda. They sold it. For Tyler. They just sold it. Sarah was quiet for exactly 3 seconds before her voice turned to steel. We're coming to get you. Get dressed. We're going to fix this. But I was already pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt, my birthday outfit forgotten on the bed. I called an Uber. My first thought being that I needed to get to my parents' house, needed to see the empty garage with my own eyes, needed to make this make sense somehow. The Uber driver was chatty, asking about my plans for the day, commenting on the beautiful weather. I couldn't respond, just stared out the window, watching familiar streets pass by each mile, taking me closer to a confrontation I never imagined having. He gave up trying to make conversation after a few minutes, probably assuming I was hungover or just unfriendly. My parents' house looked exactly the same as always. Dad's sedan in the driveway, Mom's SUV parked perfectly parallel to the sidewalk, her rose bushes still blooming despite the late season. I walked to the garage and entered the code, the one they had given me 6 months ago when I started keeping my car there. The door rose slowly, dramatically, revealing exactly what I feared. Empty space where my Honda should have been. Oil stains on the concrete, the only evidence it had ever been there. I found my mother in the kitchen, sitting at the breakfast nook with her coffee and her iPad, looking at recipes like this was any other morning. She glanced up when I walked in, no surprise on her face, no guilt, just that slight tilt of her head that meant she was ready for battle. Good morning, Claire. You look upset. You sold my car. My voice came out steadier than I expected, cold and flat. We sold an asset to help Tyler's business. You'll thank us when his company is successful and supporting this entire family. It was my car, my name on the title, my payments, my property. She set down her coffee cup with a precise click. You owe us $63,000, Claire. 18 years of food, clothing, shelter. College loans we co-signed. That car was a fraction of what you owe this family. I paid back those loans. Every penny. You know I paid them back. You paid the bank, she corrected, as if that distinction mattered. We still took the credit hit for co-signing. We still took the risk. And frankly, your attitude about helping Tyler has been disappointing. Your brother is trying to build something, and you're worried about a replaceable vehicle. Where's Dad? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She waved vaguely toward his study. Working. Some of us contribute to this family's success. Tyler chose that moment to walk in through the back door, keys jingling in his hand. The keys I noticed with a sick feeling to a BMW key fob. He was wearing designer jeans and a leather jacket I'd never seen before, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine about young entrepreneurs who'd never actually built anything. "Oh, hey, Claire," he said, grabbing orange juice from the fridge. "Didn't expect you here. You knew they were selling my car." He shrugged, not even bothering to look at me. "Mom said you were cool with it. Something about family investment or whatever. Sweet ride, by the way. The BMW handles like a dream. You should see the interior. It's got this hand-stitched leather that probably costs more than your monthly rent. You used my car money for a BMW lease." He laughed that charming laugh that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. "Relax, it's a business expense. Image is everything in the luxury detailing world. Can't show up to detail Ferraris in some beat-up truck, can I? Besides, it's just a car, Claire. You make good money. Buy another one." I stood there in my childhood kitchen looking at these people who shared my DNA but felt like strangers. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. My mother returned to her iPad, and Tyler started making himself a protein shake, the expensive blender I'd bought them for Christmas last year, whirring to life. "I need the sale documents," I said finally. "If you sold my car, there had to be paperwork." Mom didn't look up from her screen. Tyler's friend Derek handled everything. Very efficient, cash deal, clean and simple. Derek Hoffman, the one who got arrested for check fraud 2 years ago? The blender stopped. Tyler turned to look at me, his expression shifting from casual to defensive. He was never convicted. And he's turned his life around. He's helping me with the business. "You sold my car to a criminal for cash under the table." Mom stood up then, her full height making her imposing despite being 3 inches shorter than me. "Enough, Claire. What's done is done. You can either be part of this family's success or continue being selfish. Your choice. But if you choose to make this difficult, remember that we know exactly how much you owe us, and we have every co-signed document to prove it. The threat was clear. Fall in line or face some kind of financial retaliation they had already planned." I looked at my father's study door, still closed, still hiding behind wood and silence. I thought about screaming, about throwing things, about becoming the kind of person who makes scenes in kitchens on birthday mornings. Instead, I turned and walked out, leaving them to their coffee and protein shakes and stolen prosperity. Sarah and Jessica were waiting in Sarah's car in the driveway. They had driven here anyway, bless them, knowing I would need them. I collapsed into the back seat and finally started crying. Not pretty tears, but the ugly kind that come with gasps and snot and sounds that barely seem human. Jessica climbed into the back with me, pulling me against her shoulder, while Sarah turned around from the driver's seat, her face murderous. "We're going to fix this," Sarah said. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to fix this." Through my tears, I managed to explain about the forged signature, the cash sale, the threats about the loans. Jessica, who worked as a paralegal, started taking notes on her phone, asking questions about dates and documentation. Sarah called her boyfriend, who happened to be a cop, asking about what constituted auto theft and fraud. I spent my birthday in Sarah's apartment, surrounded by legal websites and Colorado statutes, instead of mountain views and birthday drinks. We ordered Chinese food that I couldn't eat and opened wine that I couldn't taste. Sarah and Jessica tried to maintain some celebratory spirit, but we all knew this birthday would forever be marked by betrayal rather than celebration. That night alone in my apartment, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea going cold in my hands. 28 years old, and I finally understood that family could be the deepest source of pain in your life. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to my crisis, and I made a decision. They wanted to teach me about family priorities. I would show them exactly where my priorities lay. That night, after Sarah and Jessica finally left with promises to check on me in the morning, I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by boxes of documents I'd kept meticulously filed. My nurse's training had made me compulsive about paperwork, and now that attention to detail would be my salvation. The memories came flooding back as I sorted through old bank statements, each one a paper trail of sacrifice. There was the receipt from when I was 7, my first major disappointment. I had saved $43 in birthday money and coins found under couch cushions, planning to buy a purple bike with white streamers I'd seen at Walmart. The morning I planned to ask Dad to drive me to the store, I found my money jar empty and Tyler riding a new scooter in the driveway. Mom explained that Tyler had seen the scooter and really wanted it. And wasn't I happy to see my brother so excited? I learned to walk to school while Tyler abandoned the scooter after 2 weeks. By 12, I had gotten smarter about hiding money. Or so I thought. I won the district science fair with a project about water filtration that I'd spent months perfecting. The prize was a $500 scholarship for summer science camp. I was ecstatic until Mom informed me that fairness meant splitting everything equally. Tyler got $250 for a video game console he broke within a month. I spent that summer working at the library instead of learning about advanced chemistry. The laptop incident at 16 still made my chest tight with anger. I had worked every weekend for 6 months at Target saving for a laptop for my senior year. $840 carefully counted and recounted. I came home from school to find Tyler setting up a gaming computer in his room. My laptop money envelope empty on my desk, with a note from Mom saying she'd ordered me a basic Chromebook instead, because that's all I really needed for schoolwork. Tyler's computer cost $3,000. My Chromebook barely ran Google Docs, but the college fund theft was the masterpiece of their manipulation. 18 years of promises about how they'd been saving since I was born. How education was the most important investment. How I wouldn't have to worry about paying for school. The account had $42,000, they told me at my high school graduation dinner. Enough for a good start at any state school. 2 months later, Tyler announced his food truck idea at Sunday dinner. By Monday, my college fund was empty. And Mom was explaining how Tyler's business would pay for my entire education once it took off. The food truck lasted exactly 93 days. I know because I counted every day I worked double shifts to pay for textbooks while that truck sat rusting in the driveway. I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Screenshots of text messages where Mom admitted to taking money, bank transfers showing pattern after pattern of financial abuse, photos of Tyler's social media where he bragged about purchases made with money stolen from me. The evidence was overwhelming when laid out systematically. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Amy. "Heard you threw a fit about helping Tyler. Grandma is so disappointed in you." Then another from Uncle Richard. "Your mother is heartbroken. Family helps family Claire. Stop being selfish." And another from Aunt Helen. "Can't believe you're threatening to involve police over a simple family matter. Shameful." The family phone tree had been activated, and the story they were spreading was clear. Claire the selfish, Claire the ungrateful, Claire who had everything but wouldn't share with poor Tyler, who just needed a chance. I turned my phone to silent and continued my documentation. By 3 a.m., I had everything organized into folders. Folder 1, childhood theft. Folder 2, college fund fraud. Folder 3, recent loans never repaid. Folder 4, the car situation. The total amount they had taken from me over 21 years came to approximately $73,000, not including interest or opportunity cost. And that was just what I could document. I thought about Tyler's patterns of failure, each one funded by someone else's sacrifice. The restaurant that failed because he refused to show up before noon. The cryptocurrency scheme where he invested $30,000 of our parents' retirement without understanding basic blockchain. The import business that never imported anything, because Tyler couldn't be bothered to research customs regulations. The dating coach service he started despite never maintaining a relationship longer than 3 months. Each failure was met with the same response from our mother. Tyler just needed more support. Tyler was still finding himself. Tyler had such potential if people would just believe in him. And always, always, Claire should help, because that's what good sisters do. The breaking point wasn't even the car, I realized. It was the casualness of it. The way they sold my property like it was theirs, announced it in a text, like they were telling me about dinner plans, demanded more money on top of the theft, like I was the one who owed them something. They had taken my birthday, the one day I had claimed for myself, and turned it into another reminder that I existed only to serve their needs. I opened my laptop and started typing. First, a detailed timeline of events, then a formal demand letter that I would have a real lawyer review. Finally, a post for social media that I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to publish. But writing it felt like therapy, like reclaiming my voice after years of being told to stay quiet and be grateful. By the time the sun came up painting my apartment in soft gold light, I had a plan. Not just for getting my car back, but for getting my life back. They had pushed me too far, and now they would learn that the quiet daughter, the responsible one, the one who always gave in, had finally found her backbone. My phone showed 47 missed calls from various family members. I deleted the voicemails without listening. Today was supposed to be my birthday celebration, and in a way it would be. Today was the day I was reborn as someone who refused to be a victim anymore. I made coffee, took a shower, and put on my best professional outfit. I had a lawyer to see evidence to file and a family to hold accountable. They thought they had won by taking my car. They had no idea they had actually started a war. The first stop was my friend Marcus from law school. He had gone into criminal law while I chose nursing, but we'd stayed close. His office was in downtown Denver, a gleaming building that smelled like leather and justice. His assistant showed me in immediately, and Marcus took one look at my face and cleared his schedule. Grand theft auto, he said, after reviewing my documents. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. Claire, your parents could go to prison for this. I don't want them in prison, I said carefully. I just want my car back and for this to stop. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes studying me. You know it won't stop, right? People like this don't just stop because you ask nicely. They stop when they face consequences. He was right, of course. 28 years of evidence proved he was right. But these were still my parents, and Tyler was still my brother, and some part of me kept hoping they would suddenly see me as family instead of a resource to exploit. We can start with a civil demand, Marcus suggested. Give them a chance to return the car without criminal charges. But, Claire, if they don't comply, you need to be prepared to follow through. Empty threats will only make things worse. I signed the papers. He prepared, my hands steady despite the earthquake in my chest. This was it, the point of no return. Once these documents were delivered, I couldn't pretend our family dysfunction was normal anymore. I couldn't smile through Sunday dinners and write checks for their emergencies and pretend love looked like emptying yourself for people who never said thank you. Marcus had the demand letter delivered by noon, official legal letterhead sent by courier requiring signature. I knew the moment it arrived because my phone exploded with calls and texts. I didn't answer any of them, but I did read Tyler's text that simply said, "You psycho bitch," and my mother's voicemail transcription that started with, "How dare you," and ended with, "You'll regret this." Sarah came over after her shift at the marketing firm, bringing Jessica and wine and Thai food. They sat with me as I finally told them everything, not just about the car, but about the years of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and favoritism that had shaped my entire life. Jessica, ever the paralegal, took notes and kept saying that's illegal about various incidents. Sarah just held my hand and looked murderous on my behalf. The next morning I went to work because I needed the normalcy of saving lives that actually wanted to be saved. My supervisor, Dr. Amanda Chen, noticed my distraction immediately. She pulled me aside during lunch break, her kind eyes concerned behind her glasses. "Claire, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept, and Nancy said you were crying in the supply closet." I broke down and told her everything. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly angry as I explained the situation. When I finished, she pulled up our hospital's employee assistance program on her computer. "We have resources for this," she said firmly. "Financial abuse is abuse, Claire, whether it comes from family or not. I'm giving you the rest of the week off paid. Use it to handle the situation. And if you need a longer leave, we'll make it happen. I protested that I couldn't leave my patients, but she cut me off. Your first responsibility is to yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup, and right now yours isn't just empty, it's shattered. Go home. Fix this. We'll be here when you're ready. That afternoon, Marcus called with interesting news. He had done some digging and found that Derek Hoffman, Tyler's friend, who allegedly bought my car, had quite the reputation. Not only did he have the check fraud arrest, but he was currently under investigation for running an illegal chop shop. The chance that my car was sold legitimately was basically zero. I think your car might still be at his lot, Marcus said. If we move fast, we might be able to recover it before it disappears. But Claire, we need to involve the police now. Something in me finally snapped into place like a bone setting after being dislocated. Do it, I heard myself say. File the report. All of it. Marcus made the calls while I sat in his office listening to him explain grand theft auto and fraud to increasingly interested police officers. Within 2 hours, we had a case number and a detective assigned. Detective Morrison, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, took my statement with professional efficiency. Family theft cases are always the hardest, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. People think because it's family, it's not real crime. But theft is theft, and what your parents did is serious. We'll start by trying to locate the vehicle. If it's where we think it is, we can recover it quickly. That evening, I discovered my mother had taken her manipulation to a new level. She had called my workplace and spoken to HR, claiming I was having a mental health crisis and making false accusations against my family. She suggested I might be a danger to patients and should be evaluated immediately. Fortunately, Dr. Chen had already briefed HR about the situation. The head of human resources, Mrs. Patterson, called me personally to assure me that they recognized this as retaliation and would be documenting everything for a potential restraining order if needed. She also mentioned that impersonating a concerned medical professional to make false reports was itself a crime. Tyler, not to be outdone, had gone on social media with a carefully crafted story. According to his posts, I had promised him the car for his business, then changed my mind out of jealousy when he started succeeding. He posted photos of his BMW claiming I was trying to ruin his life because I couldn't stand to see him happy. The comments from family members were brutal, calling me every name imaginable. But then something unexpected happened. My grandfather called. Grandpa James, my mother's father, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years because of some feud I never understood. Claire, sweetheart, I saw Tyler's posts. That boy wouldn't know the truth if it hit him in the face. And I'm sorry to say your mother is the same way. I've been watching from afar, hoping she'd change, but it's clear she's only gotten worse. If you need anything at all, you call me. His words broke something loose in me, and I cried harder than I had since this started. He told me stories about my mother's behavior growing up, patterns of manipulation and entitlement that had estranged her from most of the family. The relatives attacking me now were the few she had left, the ones she could still control with her version of events. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my computer and did something I had been afraid to do. I wrote out my story, the full truth with receipts, screenshots of texts, bank statements, photos of Tyler with his new BMW, everything. I posted it on Facebook at 2 a.m., then immediately turned off my phone and went to bed. I woke up to Sarah and Jessica pounding on my door at 8 a.m. Girl, you went viral, Sarah said, shoving her phone in my face. Your post has 12,000 shares. Tyler deleted all his posts, and your mom's sister just commented saying she's been waiting 20 years for someone to finally tell the truth. The family explosion was nuclear. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were reaching out with their own stories about Patricia and Tyler. Cousins shared how Tyler had borrowed money and never repaid it. Aunts revealed how my mother had stolen from my grandmother's estate. Uncle Richard's wife admitted she had been pressured to loan Tyler $10,000 last year that they desperately needed for their son's medical treatment. But the real breakthrough came from Marcus. Derek's lot had been raided that morning on the chop shop allegations, and my car was found with altered paperwork and the VIN number partially filed off. It was evidence in multiple crimes now. Derek, facing serious jail time, immediately flipped on Tyler, and my parents, admitting they had asked him to make the car disappear and offered him a cut of the insurance fraud they were planning to commit by reporting it stolen. Insurance fraud, Marcus said, barely containing his excitement. That's federal, Claire. Your parents are looking at serious charges now. Detective Morrison called an hour later. We've recovered your vehicle. It has some damage, but it's fixable. More importantly, we have enough evidence to arrest your parents and brother. I need to know if you want to press charges. I thought about all the birthdays ruined, all the dreams deferred, all the times I had been told that family comes first while being treated as last. I thought about Tyler's smirk when he said it was just a car. I thought about my mother's cold calculation as she demanded $6,000 on top of theft. Yes, I said. Press charges. All of them. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there, but Mrs. Morrison gave me the details later. My mother was at the bank where she worked, and they had to escort her out in handcuffs in front of all her colleagues. My father was at his office and went quietly, his face gray with shock. Tyler tried to run when they came to his gym, which added resisting arrest to his charges. They were released on bail by that evening, of course. My parents used their house as collateral, and Tyler somehow convinced his latest girlfriend to pay his bond. But the damage was done. Mom was suspended from the bank pending investigation. Dad's firm put him on administrative leave. Tyler's BMW was repossessed when it was discovered he had used fraudulent documents for the lease application. The family phone call shifted from anger to pleading. Aunt Helen called crying, begging me to drop the charges. Uncle Richard offered to pay me back for the car if I would just let it go. Even my grandmother, who I learned had been fed lies for years, called to say family doesn't do this to family. But Grandpa James stood firm. He called me every day telling me stories of my mother's past, helping me understand that this wasn't my fault. She had been this way since she was young, he said. Always taking from others, always playing victim when caught. He had hoped marriage and children would change her, but it had only given her new targets. The legal process moved forward regardless of the family drama. The prosecutor, a young woman named Jennifer Wu, who had dealt with family fraud before, was particularly interested in the pattern of behavior I had documented. This wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about decades of financial abuse that had been carefully recorded. My coworkers rallied around me in ways I never expected. They organized a fundraiser to help with my legal costs, though Marcus was doing most of the work pro bono. Chen arranged for me to speak with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. The nurses on my unit took turns bringing me lunch and checking on me, their protective instincts usually reserved for patients now focused on me. 3 weeks after the arrest, I finally got my car back. It needed a new paint job where Derek had started to sand off the identifying marks, and the interior reeked of cigarette smoke. But it was mine. I sat in the driver's seat in the police impound lot and cried not from sadness, but from relief. I had won this battle even if the war was far from over. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Marcus prepared me for what would come, the testimony I would have to give the family members who would likely show up to support my parents and Tyler. He also prepared me for the possibility that they might take a plea deal avoiding trial, but also avoiding real accountability. During this time, something interesting happened with my father. He reached out through his lawyer asking if I would be willing to meet with him separately. Against Marcus's advice, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and I barely recognized the man sitting across from me. He had lost weight, his face gaunt, his hands shaking as he lifted his cup. "I failed you," he said without preamble. "I failed you every day for 28 years. I let your mother convince me that her way was right, that Tyler needed more support, that you were strong enough to handle it. I was a coward, Claire, and I'm sorry." I wanted to rage at him, to list every moment he had stood silent while I was robbed. But looking at him, I only felt tired. "Why now?" I asked. "Why speak up now when it's too late?" "Because I'm getting a divorce," he said quietly. This situation opened my eyes to what I've allowed to happen. I've started therapy. Real therapy, not the couples counseling your mother turned into another manipulation tool. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I see it now, all of it, and I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a while, the coffee shop bustling around us. Finally, I asked if he would testify to the pattern of financial abuse. He agreed immediately, saying it was the least he could do. When we parted, he didn't try to hug me or ask for absolution. He just said he would see me in court, and walked away shoulders bent under the weight of 28 years of complicity. Tyler, meanwhile, had gone on the offensive. Unable to use social media effectively after his lies were exposed, he started showing up at my apartment building. Security footage showed him trying to get in multiple times, telling residents he was my brother and there was a family emergency. Building management banned him from the property and installed additional cameras. One night, he managed to follow a delivery driver through the door. I woke up to him pounding on my apartment door at 2 a.m., drunk and belligerent, screaming about how I had ruined his life. I called 911 while he raged in the hallway, and he was arrested again this time for criminal trespass and violation of bail conditions. Mom's approach was more insidious. She contacted every relative she could find, spinning elaborate tales of my mental illness, drug addiction, or whatever would get them to pressure me. She claimed I was bipolar, that I was off my medication, that this was all a manic episode. When that didn't work, she said I was being controlled by an abusive boyfriend who didn't exist. Then she claimed I had always been jealous of Tyler, and this was my revenge for him being the favorite. Some relatives believed her. They always would. But more and more family members were reaching out with their own stories, their own moments of manipulation and theft. Cousin Amy, who had initially attacked me, called to apologize and share how Mom had convinced her to invest in Tyler's restaurant, losing $15,000. Uncle Richard's son revealed that Tyler had stolen his identity to open credit cards when he was in college. The evidence was mounting, and the prosecutor was building a strong case. But the emotional toll was devastating. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. Sleep became a memory. I jumped at every unexpected noise, wondering if Tyler had found another way in. The therapy helped, but some days I could barely get out of bed, the weight of 28 years of manipulation finally crushing me now that I had stopped running from it. Sarah and Jessica became my lifeline. They organized a schedule so I was never alone, staying over on alternating nights, making sure I ate holding me when the panic attacks hit. Sarah's boyfriend used his law enforcement connections to ensure patrol cars drove by my building regularly. Jessica used her paralegal network to keep tabs on the legal proceedings, making sure I was prepared for each step. 6 weeks into the legal proceedings, I arrived at the courthouse for the preliminary hearing, flanked by Sarah and Jessica, with Marcus leading the way. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Apparently, a story about parents selling their daughter's car had struck a nerve with the public. I kept my head down and let Marcus field their questions. Inside the courtroom, I saw them for the first time since the arrests. Mom sat rigid in a navy suit, her hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the wronged mother. Tyler slouched beside her in an ill-fitting borrowed suit, his usual confidence replaced with sullen anger. Dad sat separately closer to the back, his lawyer beside him. The prosecutor, Jennifer Wu, laid out the case methodically. The forged signatures, the fraudulent sale documents, Derek's testimony about the insurance fraud plot, the pattern of financial abuse going back years. She presented my evidence, each piece building on the last, creating an undeniable picture of systematic theft. My mother's lawyer tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding. He talked about the sacrifices parents make, the difficulties of raising children, the way family members share resources. He suggested I had given verbal permission for the car sale and was now experiencing buyer's remorse. He even tried to introduce the supposed $6,000 debt, though that was quickly shut down when Jennifer produced my bank records showing I had paid back every penny of the student loans. Tyler's public defender went for sympathy, painting him as a struggling entrepreneur trying to make his family proud. The car situation was a miscommunication, he claimed. Tyler thought I had agreed to help him. The BMW lease was a business necessity that would benefit everyone once Elite Shine took off. It was almost laughable if it hadn't been my life they were dismantling. Then came my turn to testify. Marcus had prepared me, but nothing really prepares you for sitting in a witness box staring at the people who raised you while describing their crimes. I spoke clearly, professionally, my nurse's training in giving precise reports serving me well. I detailed the birthday morning, the text message, the discovery of the theft. I explained the pattern of taking that had defined my childhood. I presented the evidence of their lies to the family, their attempts at manipulation, Tyler's harassment. My mother stared at me the entire time, her eyes cold and calculating. Tyler wouldn't look at me at all, fidgeting with his phone until the bailiff took it away. But it was my father who broke me. When I described finding my college fund empty, tears rolled down his face. When I talked about working nights to pay for textbooks while Tyler's food truck rotted in the driveway, he put his head in his hands. The cross-examination was brutal. My mother's lawyer questioned my memory, my motives, my relationship with my family. He suggested I was angry about Tyler's success, jealous of the attention he received, bitter about my student loans. He tried to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who had turned on her family the moment they asked for help. But Jennifer was ready for this. She redirected with questions about specific incidents, had me identify documents, played recordings of voicemails where my mother admitted to taking the car. By the time I stepped down, the story was clear, documented, and undeniable. Other witnesses followed. Detective Morrison testified about the condition of the car when recovered the evidence of fraud. Derek, in an orange jumpsuit and chains, admitted to everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. Even Mrs. Patterson from HR testified about my mother's attempts to have me fired through false reports. Then came the surprise witness. My father took the stand for the prosecution. The courtroom gasped. My mother's face went white, and Tyler looked like he might bolt. Dad testified for 40 minutes, confirming every incident I had described, and adding more I didn't even know about. He admitted to being aware of the thefts, the manipulation, the way I had been treated as the family bank account. He apologized to me directly from the stand, his voice breaking. By the time the hearing ended, the judge had heard enough. All charges would proceed to trial. Bail was continued with stricter conditions, including a restraining order keeping all 3 defendants away from me. The judge particularly noted the seriousness of the forgery and fraud charges, mentioning that prison time was likely if convicted. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had intensified. My story had gone viral, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences of family financial abuse. I gave a brief statement that Marcus had prepared, thanking the justice system and my support network before escaping to Sarah's car. That night, I sat in my apartment, finally alone by choice, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom, not just from their theft, but from the obligation to pretend everything was fine. The weight that had been crushing me for weeks started to lift, replaced by something that felt like hope. The trial was set for 3 months out, but something told me it would never happen. Mom was too proud for the spectacle of a full trial, too aware of her image. Tyler was too scared of actual prison, and Dad had already chosen his side by testifying. They would take a plea deal, I was certain. I was right. 2 weeks later, Marcus called with news. The prosecutor had offered a plea deal. Guilty pleas to theft and fraud charges, 2 years, probation for my parents, 18 months for Tyler, full restitution for the car's value plus damages, and a permanent restraining order. If they violated probation, or the restraining order, they would serve 2 to 5 years in prison. They took it. The day they signed the plea deal, I drove my newly repaired Honda up to Rocky Mountain National Park alone. The drive Sarah and Jessica and I had planned for my birthday, 3 months delayed, but somehow more meaningful. The leaves had turned and fallen, leaving the aspens bare against the early winter sky. The mountain air was sharp and clean, burning my lungs in the best way. I hiked to Emerald Lake, the trail icy in spots requiring careful steps. The lake was partially frozen, its surface a mirror for the mountains surrounding it. I stood there, 28 years old, financially abused, emotionally battered, but still standing, still breathing, still moving forward. The restitution check arrived 2 weeks later, $22,000. The car's value plus damages plus legal fees. I stared at it for a long time, this piece of paper that represented so much more than money. It was validation, proof that what they did was wrong, evidence that I deserved justice. I paid Marcus his fees, though he tried to refuse. I donated some to the domestic violence shelter that had provided resources during the worst days. I put the rest in savings, the first money I'd ever had that came with no strings, no guilt, no family obligations attached. Tyler's business folded within a month of the plea deal. Without my parents' money or my involuntary contributions, he couldn't even make the first lease payment on his equipment. His girlfriend left him when she learned the truth about the car theft. He moved back in with our parents, 36 years old, and still dependent on them for everything. My mother lost her job at the bank. Financial institutions don't employ people with fraud convictions, even with suspended sentences. She tried to spin it as early retirement, but everyone in their social circle knew the truth. The careful image she had maintained for 56 years crumbled in a matter of months. Dad followed through with the divorce. He moved to a small apartment on the other side of the city and continued therapy. We met for coffee once a month, carefully rebuilding something that might someday resemble a relationship. He never asked for forgiveness, just for the chance to do better. The extended family slowly came around. Cousin Amy started a group chat for all the relatives Tyler had scammed, comparing notes and supporting each other. Aunt Helen apologized in a long letter, admitting she had always known something was off, but had chosen the easy path of believing my mother. Uncle Richard and his wife invited me to Thanksgiving, the first family holiday I'd been genuinely welcome to in years. But the most meaningful connection was with Grandpa James. At 78, he became the parent I'd always needed. We had dinner every Sunday, just the two of us, talking about everything except Patricia. He told me stories about my grandmother, who had died when I was 5, how she would have been proud of me for standing up for myself. He helped me understand that family patterns could be broken, that I wasn't doomed to repeat their mistakes. Work became my sanctuary. Dr. Chen promoted me to charge nurse, noting that my ability to remain calm under family pressure translated well to managing difficult patients and situations. My colleagues who had watched the entire saga unfold became my chosen family. We celebrated my 29th birthday with a surprise party in the break room, complete with a cake that said "Finally Free." Sarah and Jessica remained my pillars. Sarah got engaged to her cop boyfriend, asking me to be her maid of honor. Jessica started law school, inspired by the legal proceedings, to become more than a paralegal. We still met every Thursday for wine and what we called family therapy, which was really just us processing the insanity of what had happened. Therapy helped me understand the deeper impacts of what I'd endured. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, specialized in family trauma and helped me recognize that I had been the family scapegoat designated from birth to be the one who gave while Tyler was designated to receive. It wasn't personal, wasn't about who I was as a person. It was about roles assigned before I could even speak. I learned about financial abuse as a form of control, how it's used to keep victims dependent and compliant. I learned about parentification, how I had been forced to be the adult while my parents acted like children. I learned about narcissistic family systems, where one person's needs consume everyone else's existence. 6 months after the trial, I started speaking at support groups for family abuse survivors. My story resonated with so many people who had been told that family comes first, that blood is thicker than water, that they owed their parents for basic care. I helped them understand that raising a child doesn't create a debt, that love isn't measured in dollars, given that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. One woman, Maria, shared how her brothers had sold her house while she was deployed overseas. Another, David, talked about his parents draining his children's college funds for a pyramid scheme. Story after story of family members who felt entitled to take what others had earned. Each story made me feel less alone, less crazy for standing up to my own family. A year after that birthday morning, I traded in the Honda for a new car. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The Honda had been recovered, but it still carried the ghost of their betrayal. The new car, a practical Toyota RAV4, was bought entirely with my own money on my own credit, with no one else's name anywhere on the paperwork. I paid cash, the freedom of that moment making the salesman's eyes widen. Tyler tried to contact me once a year and a half after the restraining order was issued. Not directly, which would have violated the order, but through a mutual acquaintance from high school. He wanted to apologize, she said. He had been going to therapy and realized how wrong he'd been. He wanted to make amends. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds before declining. An apology without changed behavior is manipulation. And Tyler had shown no signs of actual change. He was still living with our mother, still unemployed, still posting on social media about his next big business idea. If only someone would invest in his potential. Some people never learn because they never face real consequences. Even probation hadn't been enough to fundamentally change who he was. Mom never attempted contact. I heard through Grandpa James that she had constructed an elaborate narrative where she was the victim of an ungrateful daughter and a justice system that didn't understand family dynamics. She told anyone who would listen that she had given me everything and I had betrayed her for money. The irony of that statement was lost on her completely. 2 years after the birthday incident, Dad remarried. A quiet woman named Susan, who had also survived a toxic first marriage. They invited me to the wedding, a small ceremony in their backyard. I went surprising myself and found genuine happiness for him. He had broken the pattern, escaped Patricia's web, and found someone who treated him as an equal partner. His speech at the reception included an apology to me public and heartfelt acknowledging his failures as a father. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. 3 years have passed since that birthday morning when my life imploded and rebuilt itself. I'm 31 now, and I barely recognize the person who used to hand over money every time her family asked. That version of me feels like a ghost, someone I mourn for and feel proud of simultaneously. She survived 28 years of systematic exploitation, and that takes a strength I didn't recognize until I stopped needing it. The financial recovery was gradual but steady. Without the constant drain of family emergencies and Tyler's business ventures, I actually accumulated savings. Real savings, not just money waiting to be claimed by the next crisis. I bought my first home last year, a small condo in a building with excellent security and no forwarding address my mother could find. The day I signed the papers, I sat on the floor of my empty living room and cried from pure joy. My relationship with money transformed completely. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I had been conditioned to see money as something that belonged to others, something I was selfish for keeping. Now I budget with precision, save with purpose, and spend on myself without the crushing guilt that used to accompany any personal purchase. I even took a vacation last year, a week in Hawaii, that cost more than any single thing I'd ever bought for myself. I sent no one pictures, told no one details, and felt no obligation to bring back gifts. The career growth continued as well. I completed my master's in nursing administration, paid for by the hospital's education program and my own savings. No loans, no co-signers, no one else's name on my achievement. Dr. Chen promoted me to Assistant Director of Nursing for the Cardiac Unit, a position that came with a substantial raise and the kind of respect I'd never received from my biological family. I mentor young nurses now, particularly those from difficult family situations. I can spot them immediately, the ones who apologize for existing, who never mention their achievements, who flinch when praised. I tell them my story when appropriate, showing them that professional success doesn't require family support, that they can build their own foundations. One young man, Keith, told me I was the first person to ever say he deserved good things. We both cried in my office that day. The chosen family I've built continues to strengthen. Sarah had her first baby 6 months ago, a daughter named Luna, who has more aunts and uncles than she can count, none of them blood-related. Jessica graduated law school and specifically chose family law, helping other victims of financial abuse navigate the legal system. We still meet every Thursday, the wine replaced with coffee. When Luna joins us, our conversation shifted from crisis management to life planning. Grandpa James remains my strongest family connection. We've traveled together twice now, including a trip to Ireland where our ancestors originated. He's shown me photo albums from before my mother's bitterness consumed her pictures of a young woman who looked happy before she decided the world owed her everything. It helps seeing that she was once different, even if she chose to become who she is now. The relationship with my father has evolved into something I wouldn't quite call normal, but that works for us. We have lunch once a month, boundaries firmly in place. He doesn't ask about Patricia or Tyler, and I don't offer information. He's genuinely interested in my life, my work, my achievements. Last month, he attended a conference where I was speaking about workplace wellness. He sat in the back row, and when I finished, he was crying. Good tears, he assured me later. Proud tears. I learned through the legal grapevine that Tyler was arrested again last year. Check fraud this time, following in Derek's footsteps. Without our parents' money to bail him out and lawyers to clean up his messes, he's facing actual consequences for the first time in his life. He's 38 years old and finally learning what accountability means. I felt nothing when I heard the news, not satisfaction or sadness, just nothing. He had become a stranger to me, someone whose choices no longer affected my life. Mom sold the family house to pay for Tyler's legal fees and her own living expenses. The house where I grew up, where my childhood was systematically stripped away, sold to a young family who will hopefully fill it with better memories. She moved to a small apartment on the wrong side of town, the kind of place she would have sneered at before. Pride goeth before a fall, and her fall has been spectacular. The restraining order expired this year. They could contact me now if they wanted to, but they haven't. I think they finally understand that the daughter they raised to be their personal bank account no longer exists. In her place stands someone they don't recognize, someone with boundaries, self-respect, and the radical idea that she deserves her own life. Dating has been its own journey. Trust doesn't come easily when your first teachers of love were also your first exploiters. But I met someone last year, a software engineer named Marcus, who has his own history with toxic family. We understand each other's triggers, respect each other's boundaries, and never assume money means love. He was there the day I bought my condo, celebrating with champagne and takeout on the floor, understanding why this milestone meant everything. People sometimes ask if I regret pressing charges, if I wish I had handled things differently. They can't understand how you could send your parents to probation, how you could cut off your only sibling. They talk about forgiveness like it's owed, like it's the price of being a good person. But forgiveness without accountability is just enabling, and I spent 28 years enabling their destruction of my life. What I've learned is that family isn't about blood. It's about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The people who share my DNA failed that test spectacularly, while people who owe me nothing have shown me what real love looks like. Sarah checking on me every morning during the trial, Jessica researching legal precedents until 3 a.m., Dr. Chen risking hospital politics to support me, Grandpa James choosing me over his own daughter. That's family. The money was never really the point, though it took me years to understand that. The car was just the final straw in decades of being seen as a resource rather than a person. Every dollar they took was a message that my needs didn't matter, that my dreams were less important than Tyler's whims, that I existed only to serve their purposes. Getting the money back through restitution didn't heal those wounds, but it did validate that I had been wounded, that what they did was wrong, that I deserved justice. Sometimes I drive past the old house not intentionally, but because that route is convenient for certain errands. I see the new family's children playing in the yard, where I once counted birthday money that would be stolen before I could spend it. Their bikes lean against the garage where Tyler's abandoned business ventures used to rot. The mother waves sometimes, not knowing who I am, just being friendly. I wave back and keep driving, leaving the ghosts where they belong. The birthday that started all of this October 15th has been reclaimed. I celebrate it now with people who actually care about me. Last year, we hiked to Emerald Lake, completing the trip that was interrupted 3 years ago. Sarah and Jessica were there, along with Marcus, some work friends, and even Grandpa James, who at 81 hiked slower, but with determination. At the lake, frozen and beautiful, we toasted with hot chocolate from a thermos, and no one mentioned the past. It was just a birthday, my birthday celebrated with joy instead of betrayal. This morning, I got a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. It was from someone named Ashley Tyler's latest ex-girlfriend. She wanted to thank me for posting my story online all those years ago. It had helped her recognize the manipulation in her own relationship with him, helped her get out before he could drain her savings for another surefire business opportunity. She wished me well and said I had saved her from making a terrible mistake. I sat with that message for a long time, thinking about ripple effects. How my decision to stand up for myself had helped strangers avoid the same trap. How breaking the silence about family financial abuse had created a conversation that helped others recognize their own exploitation. How the worst birthday of my life had led to the best life I could have imagined. They sold my car thinking they would teach me a lesson about family priorities. Instead, they taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Family isn't about blood or obligation or sacrifice without reciprocity. It's about choosing each other repeatedly with respect and genuine care. It's about building each other up instead of tearing each other down for parts. I kept the text message from that birthday morning, not out of anger or bitterness, but as a reminder of how far I've come, how much I've overcome, how strong I actually am. Sometimes when I'm doubting myself or feeling guilty about maintaining boundaries, I read it again. We sold your car, family comes first. And I remember that in their world, family came first, but I never came at all. I was last, always last, until I decided to put myself first. That decision, made in a moment of desperate clarity on my 28th birthday, saved my life. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly and surely, like healing from a chronic illness you didn't know you had. Every day without theft, manipulation, and guilt is a gift I gave myself by refusing to be their victim anymore. Do you have a similar story of family betrayal or financial abuse? I'd love to hear how you found your strength in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that family abuse is real abuse, and that they deserve better. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the best family is the one you choose for yourself. Stay strong, trust your worth, and never let anyone, not even family, convince you that love means letting yourself be destroyed.